Good evening, everyone. Today, I will take you on a journey to visit some places of social and political turmoil and conflict. I grew up in communist Romania of the 1980s, in a small Transylvanian town at the border with Hungary and, at that time, the Soviet Union. During those times, food was scarce. Food was portioned in ratios per family. Communication with the world outside Romania was severely limited and controlled. International travel and tourism into Romania was equally severely limited and heavily surveilled. It was also prohibited for Romanians to travel abroad. Now, here on the slide, you can see a picture of my father as a Border Patrol military officer. During those times, both of my parents were working for the Border Patrol. So for me, growing up in these times of turmoil, unrest, and revolutions, such as the 1989 revolution in Romania, living in a border town with parents patrolling the border fueled my dreams and desires to break free of the confines of Romania's communist borders. So, in psychoanalytic theories, it is said, broadly speaking, that we desire what we do not have. We desire what we lack. But this core desire does not pursue its own satisfaction of having what we lack. This core desire pursues its own furtherance, its own continuation, that is more desire, greater desire. So my desires have led me to work, live, and study in about 8 countries on 4 continents since 2001. I have become a social sciences researcher with keen interests in travel and tourism, in dark tourism, in social and political conflicts, in emotions and affects. Now, from all these concepts that I have just enumerated, dark tourism almost always acts as a hook for most audiences. Now, please put your hand up if you have ever heard the term dark tourism, or if you have engaged in dark tourism. Perhaps you visited places such as the former transit camp in Westerbork, here in the province of Drenthe, in the Netherlands. And you can see on the slide a picture of the wagon in Westerbork. Or perhaps you visited more known places, such as Ground Zero in New York. Or perhaps you visited tombs or graveyards of famous people, and you can see here a tourist visiting the tomb of Yasser Arafat in Ramallah. So have you heard of dark tourism? How many of you have you heard of dark tourism or engaged in dark tourism? Quite a lot of hands up. All right. Now, what is dark tourism? The term was introduced in the late 1990s by 2 British researchers, John Lennon, and not the famous Dead singer, but the British tourism researcher John Lennon, and Malcolm Foley. They define dark tourism as visitation of places connected to death, disaster, and atrocity. For mass media, dark tourism has become an incredible buzzword to get people interested in news about disasters and atrocities. And here on the slide, you can see a collage of such news items. We tourism researchers have been exploring this phenomenon for the last 3 decades to understand how it really works. One of the angles that I use to explore dark tourism in particular, but also the wider phenomenon of travel, tourism, and mobility, is via emotions and affects. Emotions, I consider, are those states that can easily be labeled as fun, fear, awe, joy, amazement, and the like. Whereas affects cannot easily be labeled, cannot easily be brought to the surface of representation, to the surface of our consciousness and awareness. Affects are like those drives residing at other than conscious levels inside of us, moving inside of us and making us move outwards as well. So tourism, in most its forms and niches, is about emotions and affects. Something that sounds so simple and common sense, right? Yet, as tourism researchers, we are just beginning to confidently vocalize this and to explore this aspect in more depth, beyond tourism emotion as tourist satisfaction that encourages repeat visits. So to reflect this idea that emotions and affects are the drivers behind travel and tourism, I put forth this concept of affective tourism in my book with the same title. By affective tourism, I mean the circulation, projection, transference, counter-transference of emotions and affects in most tourism transactions. Now, this circulation of emotions and affects contributes to shaping identity of places, especially in areas of ongoing turmoil and conflict, where multiple contested and conflicting stories about a place coexist. So to explore this process of identity formation of places, I conduct tourism ethnography. Now, what is tourism ethnography, and what does a tourism ethnographer do? As a tourism ethnographer, I immerse myself in the tourism life of a place, such as this marketplace in Jerusalem or Al-Quds. As a tourism ethnographer, I conduct interviews with locals, with tourists, with tourism industry representatives. I commission diaries from participants in my projects, written diaries, photographic diaries, video diaries. I also record my own observations, which I later analyze. So, from analyzing this wealth of information generated from these sources, it is amazing to see the power of tourism and emotion to bring people together. As tourism allows us the space, gives us the space and the emotional impetus to think through, to reflect on important issues such as death, personal traumas, collective traumas, international conflicts, peace, war, and so on. Now, in my projects, I explore tourism dynamics in the wider area of Jordan, Israel, and Palestine. I have always wanted to understand the deep connections and disconnections in this region. And here on the slide, you can see a map of the region, just to remind you of the geopolitical positioning of the area. Since 2009, I have spent accumulated of 1 year in the region. I have conducted more than 100 interviews with tourists, locals, and so on. I have taken a group of 25 students to Jordan for a fieldwork. And it is amazing to see the increased emotional awareness, cultural understanding, and compassion with which most tourists leave such places. It is equally amazing to see locals somewhat content that their realities on the ground have been witnessed by people from abroad. So tourism, in its potential for emotional engagement, is a powerful tool to make the world a better place, if and only if it is handled, it is practiced with care, compassion, good morals, and ethics. Tourism is equally a powerful tool to make us better people, as tourism again allows us the space and gives us the emotional impetus to think through, unravel, and dismantle some of our prejudices, some of our personal and collective traumas. And in the following, you will hear an interview, an excerpt from an interview that I had with a tourist from France. Now, the excerpt is the rough cut, so please pay attention to the interview and also follow the reading of the transcript on the slide. So we can play now.
It's very personal because with the stories of my dad, he did the Algerian war, and I can see the result 50 years later, because I talked with him. He was 20 years old when he left his country, lived in the countryside, and arrived in another country, give a gun, and after, save your life. I'm sure that the man who is my dad now is not the same one than before the war. I'm sad for them because I can't say for most of them it will change their life. I'm very lucky because there's no war in France. So what will I do if there's one? With my dad, is what he told me. I asked him question, how can you say méchant? Méchant, bad. Do you feel, just ask him one day, say, do you become bad, like a bad person? And he just told me, he said, yes, because you have no choice. 50 years later, he started to talk about it. So he lived with it every day. And I'm not for that. And so anyways, what I told him, say, if there's one war one day, I won't go. I shoot myself, but I won't kill someone. Never.
So for this tourist from France, traveling in these areas of turmoil, such as Jordan, Israel, and Palestine, made him think of his father fighting the Algerian war, made him think through his family memories and vocalize this in a discussion with me. And this is an example of how tourism can make us better people, as this tourist pledged not to ever fight a war and made him reflect on what war does to humanity. Now, as a tourist and tourism researcher in the region, I also encounter tourists who somewhat easily cross opposing binaries of emotions, such as joy and anger, fun and fear. Let's take the example of Josie, a tourist from China. And in an interview with me, as she was visiting the region, she said, and I quote, "I took pictures with the soldiers. I even touched them. I touched their guns. It's very cool." I remember her having said that while laughing. While at the same time, we were afraid someone shooting us. So you can see how easily she crosses these emotional binaries of fun and fear. We were afraid someone shooting us, but it was cool, right? And on the slide, you can see a picture. You can see two pictures of soldiers, armed soldiers at tourist sites, themselves having fun while pictures of them were taken. Now, tourism is not only about tourists, right? It's also about locals. And in these regions of turmoil, tourism is a chance for locals to tell their side of the story. Tourism becomes a platform to make their voices heard. Take, for example, the case of this Jordanian tour guide who in an interview with me said, and I quote, "I swear, one of the reasons why I work as a tour guide is to change that is our tourists' own perceptions, opinions about Arabs, about Islam, to show you we are something else. We are not what you hear about us in your countries." So, for me, as a tourist and tourism researcher, having grown up in communist Romania, traveling in these places makes me confront my own childhood memories and growing up with certain limitations and insufficiencies. And I want to remind you of the words of the British actress Emma Thompson when she visited the Anne Frank house, and she said, "All her would-haves are our real possibilities, our opportunities." So I want to make Well, if there is one message that I would like you to take, that I would like you to take from my talk today, is that emotions and affects are the drivers behind tourism. They create disconnections as well as connections when we visit places and when we are the visited locals. I also want to make one aspect really clear. As far as I'm concerned, tourism is a privilege. It's not a right to roam freely. Tourism is practiced by about 12 to 14% of the world's population, usually by those with enough money, with enough disposable income to spend traveling, usually originating from countries with developed economies in Europe, North America, and some Asian and Australasian countries. This further increases our responsibility to use the power of tourism to tap into our compassionate and caring emotions, to build bridges of peace, to build connections, and to turn Anne Frank's would-haves into realities. So my plea to you is this. Next time when you travel, open not only your eyes and your cameras, open your hearts as well. Take time to talk to as many people as possible, to listen to people's stories. Take time to engage with a place. Next time when you travel, let your heart be impressed by what it feels. Let your actions be driven by care and compassion. Take time to reflect on issues important to you that are brought to the surface of your consciousness and awareness by engaging with that place. Next time when you travel, perhaps keep a diary. Talk to as many locals as the place allows you. Next time when you travel, bring home messages of peace. Become the one who speaks out for the dispossessed. Become the one who has the courage to unravel and dismantle your own prejudice and the prejudice of others. Become the one who contributes to dismantling the disconnections that keep us in conflict. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is my humble bid for world peace through tourism and emotions. Thank you very much.